Born in Cambridge, Massachusetts on June 21, 1978, Julaine Jules was the oldest of 4 children born to Jermaine and Jules Vincent, Haitian immigrants who were proud to be in America.
It's a strong community rooted in faith and in hard work and people who are devoted to their children and to their education.
Julaine's parents enrolled her in the prestigious St. Clement's High School, where her passion for life was as infectious as her smile.
I remember Julaine Jules as the girl with a big smile who looked at the world as an open art, who wanted to do it all.
She loved writing poems, so she was always into literature. I remember her carrying books, but she always had like an extra notebook that was hers. And sometimes she'd be like, "You want to read my latest poem?"
She was always writing about love and the man of her dreams.
She wanted to go off to college, and she wanted to be married. We all talked about it.
Though Julaine was desperate to meet her Mr. Right, her parents enforced a strict no dating policy throughout high school.
They're having this dance at school. Can I go?
No.
Listen to your father. Go wash up. Dinner's almost ready, okay?
Julaine's family was very, very religious. They would probably look more rigid to most people, but it was how the family functioned.
While everybody was more worried about what they're going to wear for prom, who their date's going to be, where they're going Friday night, she had to be home. She was spending quality time with her siblings and still living those traditional family values. Nothing fazed her. Nothing troubled her.
After graduating from St. Clement's near the top of her class, Julaine enrolled in Emmanuel College in the heart of Boston.
In college, she started really focusing on career or where she wanted to go in life. Julaine was the first of the family to actually went to college and graduate. My parents were extremely excited.
With a degree in communications, Julaine landed a well-paying job providing customer service to Boston's financial elite.
Yes, we have your STAR account coming up.
She was working for a credit card concierge company. For instance, if you need services, anything from dry cleaning to an elephant in a circus, she handled those requests.
Though Julaine's career had taken off, she continued to live with her parents, an arrangement that certainly put a damper on her dating prospects.
Julaine was like any other young woman, wanted to date young men her age. Her mother and father kept close tabs on her, which resulted in her having to be creative in being able to socialize.
The nature of Julaine's job meant that her schedule was always changing, and she was working all times of day. This made it really easy for her to cover up a secret love life.
Men definitely noticed her, and she clearly noticed them back. But make no mistake, she was looking for her Prince Charming, not just some one-night stand.
I think she wanted to wait to see if she would find out one and possibly present it to the family. I think she really wanted to make an impression on my parents.
But on August 24th, 2004, Julaine's search for Mr. Right would be put on hold. That's when authorities discover her car engulfed in flames, with Julaine nowhere in sight. With the car fire destroying any possible evidence, detectives head to where they believe Julaine was last seen, her place of employment.
Detectives believe if Julaine's employer can pinpoint that she left work around midnight, then they can narrow down the time and the area that they have to account for her whereabouts. But in speaking to Julaine's employer, they realize she's been missing for a lot longer than they thought.
Thank you for calling. My name is Julaine. How may I help you?
She was working the 3 to midnight shift, and sometime that evening around 7 o'clock, she told her coworkers that she was going to get a cup of coffee.
I'll be back.
She took her keys and her cell phone with her.
She left her wallet behind, and it was reported that it seemed like she left in a hurry and as if she was going to come right back.
What can you tell us about Julaine's leaving? Nothing really. I know that she was upset about something. I'm not exactly sure what.
According to Julaine's employer, she never returned from her break.
It's really quite peculiar that she would just leave like that. It was urgent enough that she stepped out and left, but didn't take anything with her.
This is Jessica. She's a co-worker of Julaine. The detective's working this case.
I can tell you she was really upset. She was getting phone calls all day on her cell phone and on her work phone, and eventually she just stopped answering. A little bit later, then she took a call from her friend Melissa.
Melissa?
If you'd like, we can access her voicemail, if that'll help you out at all.
While most of the messages on Julaine's work line don't point to any leads, investigators key in on one call that came in roughly 2 hours prior to her abrupt departure.
Next message. Julaine, please give me one more chance. Or at least let's just clear the air.
They had retrieved a voicemail off of her work phone from some person identifying himself as Shabazz, saying, come to see him.
Unsure who this mysterious Shabazz is, authorities reach out to Julaine's friend, Melissa Martin, who agrees to meet with them that afternoon.
Melissa was shocked and surprised to hear that anything was happening to Julaine.
Do you know what happened to her? Do you think she's okay?
Do you know anything about a man named Shabazz?
Shabazz, yeah, that's my cousin.
Shabazz Augustine was a young man of Trinidadian extraction. He was raised in Boston and was native to the city.
He was 25 years old, a year younger than Julaine, worked at a dentist's office.
You don't think that he has anything to do with her missing, right?
We don't know. We just would like to talk to him.
Shabazz would never do anything to hurt Julaine.
Melissa explains that Shabazz and Julaine's budding romance seemed straight out of one of Julaine's many love poems.
My sense was that Shabazz was somebody who showered a lot of attention on Julaine, brought her gifts, spent money on her.
Him and Julaine have been dating for like 6 months.
According to Melissa, they met by chance. Shabazz was driving and saw Julaine walking down the street and just fell in love at first sight. He asked her out right there on the spot.
What's up? What's your name?
The way Melissa describes it, Shabazz completely worshipped the ground that Julaine walked on. He had big plans for their relationship. She wanted to take things a little more slowly, and he completely respected that.
While the relationship was still kept under wraps from Julaine's family, she did meet his family, and that includes his cousin Melissa. For the few that did know about the relationship, they thought it worked.
I have something for you.
But according to Melissa, the strain of keeping their blossoming relationship under wraps began to take its toll.
It's beautiful. Shabazz wanted to meet her family, express his love for her to them, but she was hesitant, and that caused a little bit of drama.
Drama that Melissa Martin says came to a head the weekend of August 19th.
As she understood it, Shabazz and Julaine had had a bit of a rift earlier in the weekend.
Melissa wasn't really clear about the details, but she was sure it was about their relationship and how fast it should be moving.
All I know is that after the argument, Julaine wouldn't answer any of his phone calls. And so Shabazz reached out to me. He wanted my help. He had some sort of big romantic plans or something.
He said, listen, I need you to do me a favor. I want you to call Julaine at work and do whatever it is that you need to do to get her to come to my house.
Melissa says that Shabazz had taken a page from Julaine's book and had written her a poem to profess his love. He was convinced this gesture could help get the couple past this hurdle.
So she thought that this was an opportunity to do something lovely for her cousin, and so she was very excited to participate.
Melissa explained that she called Julaine around 4:45 p.m. and begged her to hear him out, if only for a few minutes.
I think I'm about to take care of some business. I'll be back.
Julaine gave in and agreed to give him another shot.
Melissa says that Shabazz was excited to share his poem with Julaine, but he never got that chance.
Melissa called Mr. Augustine and asked him, hey, how did everything go? At which point he told Melissa she never came over.
Do you have a number for Shabazz?
Yes.
After receiving his contact information, detectives pay Shabazz a visit at the home he shares with his mother in nearby Dorchester.
What happened to Julaine?
We were kind of hoping you would help us out with that.
Once inside, Shabazz seemed concerned. His story matched pretty closely with Melissa's account of the events.
Mr. Augustine fully acknowledged that he had asked Melissa to get Julaine to leave work.
I wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to talk to me. So I tried to get my cousin to convince her to come over.
He indicated, however, that she never showed up.
Sounds serious. Were you two pretty hot and heavy?
Me and Julaine? No, it wasn't even like that. I mean, she's great and all, but she's not my main girl.
Actually, he said that he was more seriously dating a young woman named Keisha.
Was she dating other people too?
Not that I'm aware of.
Police aren't sure what to make of this. Is this a guy covering up his heartbreak? Is he telling the truth, or is he hiding something more sinister?
Mind if we take a look around?
Sure, come on back.
Shabazz allows the investigators to look around the home, but they find nothing that suggests Shabazz had anything to do with Julaine's disappearance.
We did the best we could. We looked for blood, which we did not find. We looked for any other kinds of evidence, but eventually the only DNA we found was Mr. Augustine's and his mother's.
It's really odd. On one hand, Shabazz seems to be very cooperative and seems to care. But why is his description of the relationship so different from that of his cousins? Something seems amiss.
The mystery of Julaine's disappearance only deepens when authorities obtain a warrant for her cell phone records.
As they review her call records, they see all the missed calls from Shabazz and the call from Melissa. But during the same time period, Julaine is calling and receiving calls from another number over and over.
Police track the number to a man who lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a man named Marlon Brown. Reading the text messages between Julaine and Marlon, investigators realize there's more to Julaine's secret dating life than they were initially led to believe.
The text message records revealed many conversations between Marlon and Julaine, including flirtatious exchanges and plans on when they would meet up. It was clear that they were involved in a whirlwind romance.
When police started to uncover that she was dating multiple men, it sounds like perhaps maybe there was another side of her that her family didn't know about.
Having uncovered evidence that Julaine was secretly dating not one but two men, investigators sit down with her family in hopes of obtaining additional information.
So, do the names Shabazz or Marlon mean anything to you?
No. Should they?
While Julaine's parents were in the dark about her dating life, a select few of her relatives were not.
So what are you insinuating about my daughter?
Dad, there's something you should know about Julaine.
Her brother explained to Mom and Dad that Julaine was still the good girl they knew and loved, but she started dating because she desperately wanted to find the perfect man.
But in the opinion of Julaine's brother, Julaine was seeing Shabazz Augustine, but it wasn't that serious, and she had decided that he wasn't the one for her.
Marlon was, by all accounts, the person that she really liked.
When the two met, Marlon was smitten. There was an instant connection.
Marlon worked on a cruise ship, so he traveled a lot, but anytime he had free time, he traveled to Boston to see Julaine.
In fact, he had come to visit Julaine the weekend leading up to her disappearance.
It's all about you tonight. Girl, you look beautiful. Look at you.
Thank you.
I'm missing you.
She had been dating him for several months. He flew up from Fort Lauderdale to Boston, and they were together for a couple of days. Shabazz is out of the picture. She had told him previously that she was going to be busy for those days.
Shabazz and Marlon didn't know anything about each other up to this point. A member of Julaine's family explained that Shabazz had actually been texting and calling Julaine all throughout this romantic weekend with her other boyfriend. So both guys caught on to her game pretty quickly.
Who is this?
It's just Shabazz.
Shabazz? Who is Shabazz?
Needless to say, Marlon was upset. He thought he and Julaine were exclusive.
He's nobody.
Nobody? He's texting you and calling you? What is going on?
Julaine spent that entire weekend arguing with Marlon about her relationship with Shabazz.
You want to play games? Baby. You don't know who you want, man. I don't got time for it.
August 24th rolls around, and all of a sudden, she turns up missing.
Investigators have to really wonder if Marlon could have harmed Julaine in some jealous rage after discovering the other man in her life.
After speaking with Julaine's family, investigators attempt to reach Marlon Brown.
With Marlon not answering, detectives cast their search net even wider and determined that Marlon had left the country.
Air flight records verify that Marlon left the country August 26th. That's the day after Julaine went missing.
While police would like to speak to Marlon, they have no cause to extradite him back from Haiti just yet.
There's no proof that he's connected to Julaine's disappearance, and other than the burned out car, there's no evidence that a felony of any sort has occurred.
Until Marlon comes back into the country or someone finds Julaine, there's not much more the police can do.
Weeks pass with no new developments. Then on September 19th, nearly a month after Julaine disappeared, a woman's body surfaces in the Charles River, 3 miles from Julaine's work.
A rower in the Charles River spots what appears to be a body near the Longfellow Bridge.
The body was found wrapped in plastic, tied up with chains, and then also had weights attached to make sure that the body would sink to the bottom. So whoever had done this wanted to make sure that she would never resurface.
Eventually, some of the weights fell off of the bag, and as a result, her body surfaced under the bridge.
The body is described as that of an African-American female, approximately 5 feet 4 inches. Basically a near identical description of Julaine Jules.
The remains are delivered to the medical examiner's office, but they are unable to positively ID the body right away.
There had been some disfiguration as well as decomposition. due to the fact that she had been submerged under the water.
They couldn't recognize her, so they used dental records to identify her body and came to the worst conclusion.
I remember sitting on the porch and watching the detectives walk up to the house. They said they ran all the tests that this body was Julaine Jules. Like, everything just went completely dark. I didn't know what to feel. Like, all I felt was just enormous pain.
Though the body has been identified as that of Julaine, the autopsy yields little information about her true cause of death.
We really weren't able to get a clear picture of how she died. There was no obvious injuries like gunshot wound or a stab wound or blunt force trauma.
That meant that it could have been an asphyxiation of some kind. Now, asphyxiation simply means the death from suffocation. It could come from strangulation.
But with none of the usual damage found to the neck area, investigators wonder, could a cold-hearted killer have put Julaine in the Charles River alive? With the shocking revelation of a love triangle, investigators have been circling around a pair of potential suspects. And while they've all but cleared boyfriend number one, Shabazz Augustine, detectives have been unable to track down boyfriend number two, Marlon Brown.
Shabazz raised some suspicion because he was trying to act as if he wasn't that into Julaine.
She's not my main girl.
But detectives haven't ruled out Marlon Brown either. Then, just before Julaine's funeral, the miraculous happens.
Have a seat, Marlon.
Marlon shows up at police headquarters. He claims he's just heard about what's happened to Julaine, and he grabbed the first flight to Boston.
Like Shabazz Augustine, Marlon seems genuinely distressed about Julaine's death. And when they question him, he appears ready and willing to answer every question.
Tell us about the last time you saw Julaine. Did you guys have some kind of argument?
Well, no, it started really great, but then she started receiving phone calls from some other guy. I wound up driving home early so she could take the time to figure out who she wanted to be with.
And you live in Florida, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall the date you left Boston?
The day he gives was August 22nd, a day before Julaine was last seen.
The fact that Marlon told police that he drove home is significant. Unlike flights, it's much harder to track if someone is telling the truth. So that leaves us with Marlon's time frame between the 22nd and the 25th unaccounted for.
And if Marlon's timeline is to be believed, he'd be roughly 600 to 700 miles away from Boston at the time that Julaine disappeared.
What took you to Haiti?
I'm a cruise performer.
Do you have access to email and phone when you're at sea?
Yeah, but it's so expensive, I normally don't answer.
Did you have your cell phone on when you drove from Boston to Florida?
Yeah, but what is this about?
Before they let him go, police ask him to keep them informed of his whereabouts until they can confirm his story by tracking his cell phone information.
To do this, police subpoena Marlon's cell phone records, but his aren't the only ones they're seeking to obtain.
Even though they aren't sure if Shabazz Augustine had anything to do with Julaine's disappearance, they had wanted to obtain his cell records as well.
While detectives wait on a judge to approve both subpoenas, they decide to bring Shabazz Augustine back in for questioning.
Thanks for meeting with us again.
No problem.
They're hopeful he can shed some additional light on the phone calls that he made to Julaine while she was spending the weekend with Marlon.
So what was Julaine's demeanor on the phone? Did you guys yell at each other?
Shabazz essentially gives detectives the same story as the first time they spoke. The couple had been arguing, he got his cousin to convince her to come over, and Julaine no-showed.
Listen, you guys are trying to make it seem like it was some huge blowout. It wasn't even like that.
Okay, easy, Shabazz. These are just basic questions. You don't have to get hot under the collar.
As detectives continue to dig for information about those phone calls and Julaine's state of mind during those calls, he slips up.
I wasn't even with her that weekend. Marlon was.
He brought up the name of the other boyfriend, Marlon.
The problem is that in his previous interview, he claimed to not know if Julaine was seeing anyone else. So this was a clear contradiction.
Now, you said you didn't know Julaine had another boyfriend. How do you know Marlon?
Man, I don't know.
If Shabazz hadn't known Julaine was seeing someone else, how did he know the name Marlon? Police hadn't mentioned that information to him.
Shabazz, where were you at 7 p.m. the night that Julaine disappeared?
I was with my girl Keisha. You got it all wrong.
When they told him that they were going to check cell tower records, he had an emotional breakdown and he couldn't continue the interview.
It's possible that this was his reaction to the thought of looking at murder charges for a crime he didn't commit, but Shabazz didn't do himself any favors by lying to police.
At the same time, Marlon certainly hadn't been put in the clear by anything Mr. Augustine had said either.
So police feel strongly that one of these two men is responsible for Julaine's murder, but they just don't have enough evidence to charge either one of them with a crime.
Detectives have subpoenaed both Shabazz and Marlon's cell phone records. Finally, a Boston judge grants the order. The first records to roll in are Marlon Brown's.
Activity from cell phone towers showed that Marlon was some 600 miles away driving through Virginia on the night that Julaine went missing and her car was found. This means there's no way that he could have been the killer.
Hours later, Shabazz Augustine's phone records arrive and paint an entirely different story of his whereabouts the night Julaine disappeared.
Mr. Augustine's cell phone records ended up yielding some of the most significant evidence in the case.
The records confirm more than a dozen phone calls to Julaine Jules on the day of her disappearance, none of which are answered, in addition to a conversation with his cousin, Melissa, at around 6 p.m. Still, it's activity later in the night that interests investigators most.
It's about 12 that the car is found burning. Mr. Augustine places a phone call at around 12:30. The records from that phone call show that he's in the approximate location of where the car is found burning.
But remember, his statement to the police was that he was never there. And so the fact that his cell phone was bouncing off of a tower was an enormous piece of evidence in the case.
Shabazz's cell phone records indicate that not only was he in the vicinity of Julaine's vehicle around the time it was set ablaze, he may not have been working alone.
He made a 91-minute phone call that began shortly after midnight, and we eventually determined who the person was that he was speaking to, and that was Keisha.
It's the same Keisha that Shabazz claims is his primary girlfriend.
Oh, it's my girl Keisha.
Was it possible that Keisha and Shabazz conspired to murder Julaine?
While phone records put Shabazz at the scene of Julaine's burning car, it's not strange to think that someone else may have helped him commit the crime, or even been the driving force behind it.
Detectives bring Keisha in for questioning.
What exactly is the relationship between you and Mr. Augustine?
We've been dating off and on for a couple of years now, but to be honest, it's more of like a friends with benefits type situation.
Were you aware that he was dating another woman at the time named Julaine Jules?
Is that the woman they found in the river?
She was very forthcoming about the details of their relationship. She said she knew that he was dating other people, but claimed not to know that Shabazz was dating Julaine.
Wait, do you guys think Shabazz has something to do with that lady's death? This just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, he can be pretty passionate, but he's not that kind of guy.
Well, let's first start with the conversation that you all had on the 24th of August.
He gets on the phone with Keisha, and she then proceeds to talk to him throughout the entire way.
Keisha explained that he was making his way from Revere to his home in Dorchester, taking both a public bus and going on foot.
While Keisha is still convinced that Shabazz wasn't capable of committing murder, she admits that he did say some unusual things during that late-night phone call.
She says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm out running an errand for my mother," which makes no sense.
But according to Keisha, that wasn't all.
He said he had gotten into a pretty nasty fight with a friend and that he was probably never going to see them again.
He said, like, I'm willing to take the consequences of my actions.
He said something about letting his emotions get the best of him, and I didn't think anything of it.
There was no, what I would call a specific confession or admission to the crime, but clearly the references and allusions were that they were discussing the incident.
Have you ever met Julaine?
No, I don't know who that is.
Knowing that he was near where Julaine's car was discovered, this looks bad. But consider this, it could be a weird coincidence. Cell location tracking isn't exact, so it doesn't prove that he's the one who killed Julaine or even destroyed the car.
While Keisha's statement further cements detectives' hunch that Shabazz Augustine is responsible for the death of Julaine Jules, without additional physical evidence, arresting Shabazz is becoming more difficult by the day.
It wasn't like there was any witness to the whole thing. Beyond the fact of the accelerant, there was nothing forensically that could lead us to anything in particular.
Shabazz emerges as their prime suspect, but at this point they also don't have enough physical evidence to indict Shabazz.
Months turn into years, and though the investigation remains open, there are no new developments.
We asked the questions, what's going on with the case? Where does this stand? We just didn't get much in the way of an answer other than it's still active.
No one is more frustrated with the lack of an arrest than Julaine's friends and family.
We were getting frustrated because the prosecutor kept telling us, just be patient.
It's been 4 years since Julaine Jules' body was found in the Charles River, and the case remains unsolved. Those cell phone records place one of Julaine's boyfriends, Shabazz Augustine, near her vehicle at the time of the crime. There's nothing concrete to warrant an indictment.
The family always had a feeling that, okay, he was the culprit. He was the person that actually did this.
I believe the police and investigators did have a pretty good understanding of what likely happened. Their challenge was proving it.
If Shabazz Augustine was in fact involved in the murder of Julaine Jules, there's no sign he intended to run from police.
Shabazz Augustine stayed in Boston, worked in Boston, started a new relationship, and essentially had a family here that kept him rooted in Boston. He was leading a fairly normal life here, almost as though nothing had happened.
This made many wonder if everyone had gotten this case wrong from the get-go. That maybe it wasn't Shabazz or Julaine's other boyfriend, Marlon. Maybe it was a random act of violence.
But in 2008, a change in law enforcement jurisdictions results in Julaine's case being transferred from the county of Middlesex to neighboring Suffolk County. It's a change that breathes new life into the investigation.
The folks in Middlesex County did a good job, but moving the case to Suffolk County allows a fresh set of eyes to look at the case, and it brings a renewed sense of purpose to solving it.
But it was a systematic and painfully slow building of a case.
Over the next 3 years, Suffolk County investigators methodically pour over evidence and re-interview individuals close to Shabazz and Julaine at the time of the crime. Eventually, their hard work pays off when two of Shabazz's relatives come forward with some shocking information.
Thank you for talking to us. I heard you're the DA over Julaine Jules' murder case?
Yes. You know something about her?
Yeah, actually with Shabazz Augustine's cousins.
Over the years, Shabazz started to say certain things that implicated him as the murderer, things that either sounded remorseful and things that also sounded a bit cocky.
These two individuals recounted an instance in the 2 to 3 days leading up to Julaine's disappearance in which Mr. Augustine said, I'm going to take a pillow and I'm going to try to smother you. And when you get to the point where you can't breathe anymore, I want you to tap out.
Hey, man, get up off him, man. Damn.
Man, come on, man. It was just a game, man. Man, y'all silly.
And unlike strangulation, suffocating someone this way isn't going to leave any marks.
Would you be willing to testify?
Definitely we would be. There is more, though.
Mr. Augustine had confessed to the murder to his mother. At some point after the crime, her son had confessed to killing Julaine.
We may never have gotten this information had that third party not stepped up.
This shocking revelation allows Suffolk County prosecutors to bring the case to the grand jury and ultimately issue an arrest warrant.
Mark called us and told us that they have enough evidence to charge him with the murder of Julaine. So they arrested him at work.
From what I understand, he was taken into custody without any incident. Very easy process.
Finally, a trial date is set. September 4th, 2012, almost a decade after the murder of Julaine Jules. But just before the opening gavel is set to drop, Shabazz's defense team makes a surprise move.
Shabazz Augustine is offering to plead guilty to second-degree murder.
On January 27th, 2016, Julaine's family finally gets their day in court.
The terms of the plea deal do not require the killer to admit to any of the details of the murder. But at the sentencing hearing, the DA is allowed to present what the state believes happened the night that Julaine Jules was murdered.
Prosecutors begin by laying out the events of August 19th, 2004, when Julaine's primary boyfriend, Marlon Brown, met her in Boston for what was to be a romantic weekend.
And as the weekend went on and Shabazz tried to contact Julaine with big plans for a romantic get-together, he realized she was seeing someone else, and he became furious.
So when you talk motive, my sense of this was that he simply could not wrestle with his own emotions about a woman who didn't share the same feelings towards him. why she had not returned his phone calls, why she had ignored him, basically, and that at some point, something was said that caused him to kill her.
Prosecutors believe the only logical explanation was that Julaine had gone over to Shabazz Augustine's home that night to hear him out.
I'm so glad you came.
What is this?
I'm so sorry that we've been having problems. I wrote you something that you like. Our love has many forms like the river.
But his attempts to woo her fell on deaf ears.
Look, I just came over here to be nice and break up with you in person. I don't think this is gonna work.
But I don't understand.
Things went sideways really fast and turned into a heated argument. Something clicked with Shabazz, and he decided that if he couldn't have her, then no one would.
That's not gonna happen.
He attacked her and smothered her with a pillow, suffocating her until she died. It was likely over in seconds.
With Julaine dead, Shabazz set about disposing of her body.
He had wrapped Julaine's remains in plastic and then used free weights to weight her remains down. He would have had to transport Julaine Jules' body per vehicle.
According to prosecutors, after dumping her body in the Charles River, Shabazz then drove Julaine's car to the gym parking lot in Revere and set fire to her vehicle before fleeing the scene, all while conversing with his other girlfriend, Keisha. After hearing the details of Julaine's senseless murder, the judge hands down his sentence: life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years.
Jules's mother, Jermaine Vincent, gave a victim impact statement in which she told the court that Shabazz had essentially ripped her precious child from her hands. It was a very, very emotional statement. Lots of tears were being shed in the courtroom.
It brought all feelings back, all wounds opened up. But at the end of the day, Julaine's not coming back.
Unfortunately, a case like this doesn't bring many silver linings with it. So the only thing we can take from it is that you find some measure of gratification that the person who did it won't do it again.
She was an incredible woman. She loved people. She loved life. Domestic violence is no joke. You know, I think if the family had some insight of what was going on, I think some of this could have been prevented.